So I'm now going to introduce you to someone from Ireland, Malvina Walsh, who describes herself as the advocate for infant and young child feeding protection and support through the Baby Feeding Law Group. And Malvina is going to tell us something about her reaction to the tool and her experience of using it. So over to you, Malvina.
Thank you, Julie. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you well.
Great, thank you. My name is Malvina Walsh. I'm a mother of 3 young children and joining you today from Ireland. I'm a member of the steering group of the Baby Feeding Law Group Ireland. We're a member of the IBFAN network and a sister group of Baby Feeding Law Group UK. We advocate for the strengthening of legislation and policy to protect and support infant and young child feeding, engaging with key influencers and decision makers in this space. For example, healthcare workers, academia and politics to advocate for political intervention and thus systemic change. To do this, words and arguments must be crafted wisely and sensitively to the historic context as well as contemporary perceptions and attitudes to infant and young child feeding, its value and its place in our society. So I came to this movement from my own challenges as a first-time mother and from hearing stories of mothers in my community when I was volunteering at my local Quidju breastfeeding support group and as a trainee breastfeeding counsellor there. My professional background is actually in computer science, and I worked in the multinational corporate space for many years alongside sales and marketing teams. And also to mention that as a young girl, I grew up on a dairy farm in rural Ireland. So infant feeding is a highly contentious in Ireland. Attempting to instigate discourse in this area has often been met with reluctance and trepidation, and there's been a high degree of fear that whichever type of feeding is discussed, the other type might be shamed or belittled. So that type of emotional language is limiting and no longer useful. So what language is useful? If we are to engage with those who hold the power to actually make changes, then it is useful to have guidance, leadership, and tools for changing the conversation to move in a constructive direction. So the Mother's Milk tool is one such tool that will definitively change the narrative. Here in Ireland, it is also often difficult to make the case for equality in this space, with heavy lobbying from the food and farming sectors taking place, and often with criticism that to call out damaging corporate practices could potentially damage product sales, international reputation, or jobs, and so on. So while capitalism offers a certain freedom to choose one's destiny and to pursue prosperity, if it reaches the point where it is damaging what was not broken, then accountability must be called for. So to shift perception, the value proposition of an argument must be, as the business world would call it, disruptive. While it is difficult for many to perhaps reconcile that support, protection and promotion of something that seems priceless or even an expression of love, often justification with a business case is part of the process, and that is how public expenditure works. So the return on the investment, either in the food system or for the efforts in developing policy and legislation, must be underpinned by its return. So that's the use of this tool. So when I had the opportunity to use the tool for myself, I personally felt the wow effect, and I thought, this is disruptive. First impressions matter, particularly when interacting with politicians and the media. So my initial response was very much an emotional one. I was really moved when I saw the numbers. It shifted something in me, seeing the value proposition in this format and that it is new. So having been accustomed to seeing a lot of this data for cow's milk, I could feel that this is a paradigm shift, not simply an ideological position. This tool is offering a defining moment in the history of women in an economic context, to see one of the many hidden contributions of women presented in this way. I was also particularly emotional upon inputting the data to see the value of milk produced by the mothers of Ireland, as well as a great sadness for the milk that was never had and is often grieved for. Particularly, I remembered all those women who wished to breastfeed and for whom it did not happen in the manner they hoped for, or that they learned about what they missed out on in retrospect. And as Julie mentioned, 82% of mother's milk is lost in Ireland based on the rates we do have. I felt a sense of huge value in myself personally, in a monetary contribution to my family and my children. But I also thought to myself, I want to share this with everyone, and it has given me a newfound confidence. I also feel the tool can elevate the advocacy movement by demonstrating value in a tangible and compelling way that can translate to government budgetary activities as well as the personal relatability in financial terms. So when this data is put together with the cost of not breastfeeding tool, a compelling business case can now be made to governments and policymakers for real change and to ensure the continued progress of our species rather than a regression in health, and in doing so appropriately recognising the contribution of women. Gurv Mila Mahagwev, thank you to all involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Malvina, and it makes us feel wonderful to hear your response from Ireland.